This story may be distressing to some viewers, so discretion is advised. This incident occurred during my university years. I developed a significant crush on a teacher of the university, and we became close, often meeting privately. One day on a day off from university, he called and invited me to hang out at his house. Excited about the invitation, I eagerly asked for his address. Surprisingly, he revealed he was already outside my house and suggested I come out so he could take me there. Swiftly, I hurried outdoors, only to discover a vehicle stationed in front of my family home. To my amazement, an unfamiliar person was seated in the car alongside my crush. Despite the unfamiliar face, I made the decision to join them. My crush turned to me and nonchalantly proposed, "Let's go and enjoy ourselves." With that, we departed, leaving me intrigued about our destination and the forthcoming activities. While navigating through rural roads, the car suddenly came to a stop and my crush declared, "I need to take care of something. I'll be back shortly." He exited the car, leaving me alone with uncertain thoughts. Despite my internal questioning about his abrupt departure, I held onto the belief that he would return as promised. I felt disoriented and perplexed, but I decided to focus on enjoying the drive while the other person took control. Eventually, the car came to a stop, and we arrived at a house that I recognized wasn't my crush's place. The displayed name was entirely different. The guy with me suggested going inside for a drink while waiting for my crush. Feeling obligated, as he claimed to be friends with my crush, I agreed. Upon entering, I immediately sensed that something was off. There was a strange atmosphere. Numerous unfamiliar faces, friends of my new acquaintances, were gathered around a table, which unnerved me. I questioned why I was brought there. Despite the friendly demeanor of the people, my anxiety heightened as the night progressed. I repeatedly expressed my desire to go home before it got too late, but my requests were met with indifference. The situation became more unsettling when my mom called, and one of the guys reacted aggressively when I attempted to answer. When he snatched the phone from my hand and slapped me. It became evident that the situation had escalated into something neither friendly nor normal. The individual who confiscated my phone informed me that I wouldn't be allowed to leave. Assessing the situation, I concluded that my crush had somehow orchestrated my presence with these unfamiliar men, possibly minor figures associated with the Yakuza. It appeared I would be spending the night there, and perhaps much longer. Overwhelmed with a deep yearning to see my parents again, an emotion I wouldn't wish upon even my worst enemies, I found myself breaking down in tears. They directed me to another room and instructed me to sleep. Attempting to strategize, I quietly opened the door to eavesdrop on their conversation. What I overheard shocked me. They were discussing selling me to the Koreans for a good price, pitying my situation. After their discussion, they locked my door, leaving me with no other option but to resign myself to my fate and accept the likelihood of never seeing my family or friends again. Mentally preparing for whatever would come next, I endured a week of this harrowing abduction until one night, the man who initially picked me up forcefully woke me and dragged me to a car. Thrown in with the engine starting, we drove away without a clear destination, possibly toward the Korean side. These days and nights made it challenging to escape reality, and I couldn't even find solace in family memories due to the overwhelming pain. My mind was unraveling, and I reached a point where I felt ready to die, unable to shed any more tears. Gazing absent-mindedly out the passenger side window, I started noticing familiar sights from my neighborhood as the car came to a halt in front of my house. The man instructed me to go, and he drove away into the night. His sudden change of heart left me bewildered, and to this day, I remain unaware of what prompted it. Returning home safely was an unexpected turn of events that left me dumbfounded. I entered my family home, a place I believed moments ago I'd never revisit. My mother hurried downstairs, seemingly having heard my arrival. Frustrated, she expressed her anger, likely fueled by my youth and recklessness. Fearing that divulging the truth would worsen the situation or cause her undue worry, I opted to tell her I had been staying with a friend throughout the ordeal. She scolded me for not contacting her once during the past week. Even after a decade, my mother remains unaware of the actual events. Upon returning to university, I discovered no trace of the senior, my teacher, who had initially entangled me in that distressing situation. It seemed he had left town before delivering me to those menacing individuals. I hope he can find peace, but I also hope his conscience is haunted by guilt. Though the experience was truly terrifying, I consider myself fortunate to lead a well and happy life these days. This occurred in January of last year. I had taken a week off from work following New Year's, hoping that the post-holiday period would be less busy, allowing me to enjoy some quiet time. My plans included shopping and relaxing at my apartment alone. On the day in question, I was driving around in the snow, visiting a few stores before returning home by 7 p.m. After cooling off, I settled on the couch with snacks, watching TV and occasionally dozing off after a long day out. Around 8:30 p.m., the PA system in my apartment buzzed, indicating someone outside wanted access to the building. Since I had no plans for visitors, I was puzzled about who it could be. The person continued buzzing persistently, prompting me to approach the window facing the front of the building. I cautiously lifted the blinds just enough to see an unfamiliar older man, approximately in his mid-40s, standing at the apartment building's entrance. With only 3 other residents in the complex at the time, I was familiar with everyone, and he was not one of them. Considering that if he lived there or was visiting someone, they would likely let him in, I muted the PA system and returned to watching TV without dwelling on the situation. Despite occasional dozing off, I didn't give it much thought and eventually turned off the TV, going to bed around 10 p.m. I fell asleep shortly after lying down. Several hours into the night, I abruptly woke up to a loud thud originating just outside my room. Though the noise was startling in my groggy state, I couldn't discern its source or exact location. My heart raced as I gazed at my door, anticipating any further sounds. The surroundings became eerily quiet, almost as if nothing had occurred. Deciding to investigate, I cautiously left my bed, approached the door, and pressed my ear against it. The silence persisted, with only the faint creaking of the building's walls. Turning the handle, I peered into the dimly lit living room, finding nothing unusual. Despite the darkness, an inexplicable sense of the need for quietness compelled me to refrain from drawing attention to myself. Navigating through the darkened living room, I glanced down the front hallway and discovered that my apartment door was wide open. A wave of fear surged through me, making the situation feel surreal. I took a few silent steps back, carefully retracing my path toward my room. Upon reaching the other side of the door, I noticed a significant dent in the wood near the knob. Alarmed, I rushed inside, locked the door, and retreated to my closet while dialing 911. I was convinced that the intruder must still be somewhere inside my apartment, and I feared it was only a matter of time before they reached my room. While awaiting the arrival of the police, the apartment remained eerily silent. Strangely, once the police came, they couldn't find any evidence or leads. According to their theory, the intruder likely tried gaining entry to various rooms until someone allowed them access. Once in the main stairwell, it remained unclear why they targeted my room specifically. Perhaps they believed it was unoccupied. The oddity lay in the single dent on my bedroom door, likely the source of the initial thud. It appeared more like an act of frustration than a genuine attempt to break in. Despite still residing in the same apartment, nothing else has occurred, and the identity and motives of the intruder remain unknown. This incident took place years ago when I was a new nurse in my 20s, just starting at an elderly care facility. There was a resident named Bob, an elderly man in his 70s with various health issues. He generally kept to himself and seemed like an ordinary individual. One day, it was just Bob and me, and I had to administer his medication. He had a photo album open on his lap, smiling at the pictures. Engaging in our usual small talk, I inquired if he was reminiscing about something. Bob confirmed and, when asked about missing his family, he replied that his friends were his family, and they were all gone now. Our conversation continued, and as I was about to leave, Bob offered to show me his photo album. However, what he revealed turned my stomach. About a decade ago, I was in my senior year of university. Growing up, I was somewhat of an outsider, not really bullied but without many friends. Despite my solitary lifestyle, I didn't mind it. University was followed by evenings at home, where I found solace in playing video games and immersing myself in digital worlds. It wasn't a bad life, especially since it was just my dad and me. I hold a deep love for my dad, who worked tirelessly to provide for me. When I was around 10 or 11, my mom became entangled with some unsavory individuals and their activities. Recognizing the harmful environment, my dad decided to move us away, although the process was messy. Despite his attempts to help my mom, she consistently rejected assistance, and one day, she disappeared completely. It was a sad situation, but both my dad and I moved forward. As I got older, my dad occasionally had to leave for the weekend due to work. Surprisingly, I didn't mind being left alone at that age. During one such weekend in my senior year, my routine kicked in. My dad would leave money for pizza and soda, a rare treat in our house. Even though it might seem unconventional to leave someone my age alone for a weekend, my dad trusted me implicitly. That specific weekend followed the usual script. I enjoyed the pizza and soda, took a break on the couch, and then retreated to my room for some PlayStation gaming. Typically, I played Call of Duty, but with the recent release of Grand Theft Auto Online, I had been engrossed in that. After a few hours, I decided to switch things up and delve into the single-player story mode. As I grew older, I found myself playing the story mode in games less frequently. However, on this particular night, I had a sudden desire for a gaming experience with more substance, even if it involved Grand Theft Auto. Since I had stopped playing online, I decided to take off my headphones. I generally disliked wearing them for extended periods as they tended to cause discomfort in my ears. After playing for a while, I thought I detected some faint sounds emanating from downstairs. They weren't loud or chaotic, just subtle vibrations and minor thuds. Despite having been home alone numerous times before, I couldn't recall ever experiencing these vibrations or hearing such soft noises. Nevertheless, the noise was so faint that it didn't trigger a sense of alarm in me. The clock showed a little past 1 in the morning, and it's natural to feel a bit uneasy when alone at that hour. At intervals, I caught a faint scuffling noise. Intrigued, I paused the game and strained my ears to listen. Most of the time, all I could discern was silence, occasionally punctuated by a subtle bump or similar sound. As I grew older, I found myself playing the story mode in games less frequently. However, on this particular night, I had a sudden desire for a gaming experience with more substance, even if it involved Grand Theft Auto. Since I had stopped playing online, I decided to take off my headphones. I generally disliked wearing them for extended periods as they tended to cause discomfort in my ears. After playing for a while, I thought I detected some faint sounds emanating from downstairs. They weren't loud or chaotic, just subtle vibrations and minor thuds. Despite having been home alone numerous times before, I couldn't recall ever experiencing these vibrations or hearing such soft noises. Nevertheless, the noise was so faint that it didn't trigger a sense of alarm in me. The clock showed a little past 1 in the morning, and it's natural to feel a bit uneasy when alone at that hour. At intervals, I caught a faint scuffling noise. Intrigued, I paused the game and strained my ears to listen. Most of the time, all I could discern was silence, occasionally punctuated by a subtle bump or similar sound. I resolved to go downstairs and investigate to reassure myself that there was no intruder in the house. It was evident that my imagination was running wild. Slowly, I crept down the upstairs hallway and reached the top of the staircase. As I headed in that direction, the muffled sounds grew louder and a sense of apprehension started to take hold. The idea of calling the police crossed my mind, but anxiety held me back. I questioned whether it was worth bothering the police if nobody was actually there. Upon reaching the bottom of the stairs, I noticed a light casting illumination on the dark walls from the other side of the house. The kitchen light was on. While it was plausible that I had left it on, I was fairly certain I had turned it off before going upstairs. I cautiously made my way towards the kitchen, moving slowly. When I was just a few feet from the kitchen doorway, I could hear what seemed like someone searching through my cabinets, accompanied by a soft humming voice. Anticipating a menacing burglar, the voice suggested a different scenario. Peeking around the corner, I spotted a petite woman next to the kitchen sink, with wildly disheveled hair blowing in every direction. Holding my phone, ready to call the police, I found myself frozen in terror yet intensely curious. To my astonishment, I recognized this woman as my mom. She was singing Disney songs, including one she used to sing to me when I was very young, the memory being one of the few I had left of her. I was almost overwhelmed and on the verge of fainting. Despite the recognition, something felt off. My mom's appearance was not as I remembered. Her teeth seemed rotten, and her eyes appeared sunken into her face. A voice that should have been comforting now felt unsettling. "There's my child. Why are you awake at this late hour?" I remained silent, standing like a statue. She approached me, placing her soiled hands on my shoulder. "What am I going to do with you?" "Your father, always swapping out cabinets." "That man never listens," she chuckled, the laughter lacking charm or comfort. It seemed like she wasn't fully present. Turning away, she resumed humming and inspecting the cabinets. Snapping out of my trance, I retreated to my room, locking the door and contacting the police and my dad. Without revealing much, my dad ensured I was securely in the bedroom, hinting that my mother might pose a danger. As a precaution, the police arrived, and I overheard a commotion downstairs. My mom vehemently protested the police presence, but they were aware of the situation through my account and my dad's. A brief struggle ensued, followed by silence. After a while, a cop reassured me it was safe to come downstairs. I spoke with the police, and another officer escorted my mother away. Throughout the night, an officer remained stationed outside my house until my dad returned, providing a sense of security. My dad conversed with the officers, and from his demeanor, it was evident he felt uneasy, acknowledging that we might have narrowly avoided a disastrous outcome. When my mother was apprehended, she was actually carrying 2 knives. One of them she must have had from the break-in, and the other was a sharp kitchen knife belonging to my dad, discreetly tucked into her pocket while she was in the kitchen. Although she never used them, the mere presence of the knives was deeply unsettling. The most chilling aspect of this nightmarish incident, however, was that my mother had no knowledge of our current residence, or at least she wasn't supposed to. To safeguard me, my dad had kept our new location a secret after we moved far away. To gain access, she broke into the house by shattering one of the downstairs windows and crawled in. I didn't hear a thing, likely because I still had my headphones on or something. The idea of my mother humming and moving around downstairs, potentially waiting for my dad while I remained oblivious, still haunts me to this day. It's been approximately 10 years, and I've encountered my mother only twice since that fateful night. She has been in some form of institution for years now, with no recollection of that night or much else, for that matter. It's a sad reality. Whenever I hear Disney songs, I tend to freeze up. I hope that one day I can overcome the fear from that night and remember my mom in a more positive light. On a different note, I used to have a weekly overnight babysitting job for a couple who often spent nights caring for one of their ailing parents in a nearby city. It was an easy gig as they had only one independent 8-year-old child. I played with him, prepared him for bed, and then spent the rest of the time watching TV, raiding their fridge, and sleeping on their couch. One aspect of the job that I despised was the house itself. Situated in the countryside, it was a somewhat modern residence with large, open windows and a design that lacked curtains for me to draw closed. This left me exposed to the unsettling thought that someone outside could easily observe me while I watched TV, inducing a constant undercurrent of anxiety. On one particular night, as I sat in the living room, I thought I heard an unusual sound. Reducing the TV volume, I confirmed the presence of a faint tapping noise. Despite a thorough search revealing nothing amiss, I attributed the sound to a tree or some external source. However, each time I increased the volume, the tapping persisted. Eventually, I turned off the TV entirely and cautiously roamed the house. In the dimly lit surroundings, my eyes adjusted, revealing a man outside the window, his fingernail tapping against the glass in a rhythmic pattern. He wore a chilling smile as he stared at me. Overwhelmed with fear, I rushed upstairs to check on the child. Adding to the distress, there was no phone upstairs, forcing me to stealthily return downstairs to retrieve one and call the police. While doing so, I tried to avoid glancing back at the window, but a quick look confirmed he was still there, observing me with unsettling calmness. I secured myself and the child in his bedroom, awaiting the arrival of the police. However, upon their investigation, they found no evidence of anyone in the vicinity of the house. It seemed as though they might have dismissed my account as a prank, but I am certain that the person I witnessed was a fully grown man, standing there and deriving pleasure from the fear he instilled in me that night. I'm an 18-year-old guy residing with my mom. While we don't occupy the house of my childhood, we're situated in the same neighborhood as my grandma's place, merely a minute away from all our aunts, uncles, and cousins. This area holds sentimental value for me as I grew up here, and it has always been a pleasant and joyful environment. I cherish this locality, feeling at ease almost everywhere in the city. Throughout our time here, neither I nor any of my family members have encountered any adverse incidents. This city is close to the Gulf of Mexico and is characterized by the presence of chemical plants, attracting workers and their families from these facilities. People generally maintain a sense of privacy, emphasizing hard work and integrity. However, like any community, there are some individuals with erratic behavior. Recently, there was a disturbing incident involving the discovery of a woman's body in a storage unit. She had been murdered by her husband, who took his own life shortly after. Another unsettling occurrence involved a former colleague from the power plant where I currently work, who was arrested for fatally striking a woman with his car and fleeing the scene. While such events do occur occasionally, the majority of the time, the atmosphere remains stable. That's why the recent incident was particularly shocking to me. It was an ordinary Thursday. I woke up at 7 a.m., headed to work, and finished my day at 4 p.m. Upon returning home, I followed my usual routine, took a shower, played some video games, indulged in a bit of weed, and had dinner, a pretty standard evening. Later, my mom's friend April dropped by and stayed for a couple of hours. She resides just a block away and walked over, expressing discomfort about walking alone in the dark. Around 9 p.m., my mom informed me that she was accompanying April back to her house, assuring it would only take a few minutes. I bid them farewell, expecting to see them upon their return. However, barely a minute later, I thought I detected tapping on my window. The sound was so faint and irregular that I couldn't confirm if it was real. Feeling a bit paranoid, I turned on music to divert my attention, but I lowered the volume when I thought I heard my back door open. It's notably loud due to its age and the constant presence of a spare key in the lock, making a jangling sound each time it's opened. Turning off the music and holding my breath for a minute, I didn't hear anything else, but I sensed someone had entered my house. Although there were no footsteps or voices, the air felt charged with a silent presence. A tinge of fear prompted me to retrieve the knife stored in my desk drawer, despite the possibility that it might just be paranoia. Another spell of silence ensued, and with the idea that asserting control might intimidate the intruder, I stood up with the knife in hand. Leaving my bedroom, I whistled a single note and took steps toward the corner, planning to make a bold entrance. Just before turning the corner to get a clear view of the back door, I whistled again. The response, a whistle from my living room, sent shivers down my spine. Terrified, I cautiously peered around the corner but found no one. The door, however, was closed but unlocked. Unsure if I had left it that way, my mom returned a few minutes later, but I chose not to share the strange experience with her. The incident remains perplexing, and despite subsequent searches, I could never find evidence of anyone being there. Approximately 5 years ago, my husband John and I reached the decision that it was high time for us to embark on the journey of buying a house. From the outset, we had envisioned acquiring an old fixer-upper, driven by our belief that such homes exude more charm and character. We have a genuine appreciation for places with unique quirks, and the prospect of transforming something dilapidated into a thing of beauty appealed to us. Given my upbringing in a rural farming town in Indiana, replete with its share of rundown houses, I thought it would be an ideal place to kickstart our house hunting journey. The surrounding areas had experienced a modest surge in development, with farmland making way for new factory locations and subdivisions catering to the influx of workers. This transformation prompted us to consider it a promising location for our quest. I envisioned being closer to civilization compared to my rural upbringing, but still maintaining a comfortable distance from immediate neighbors. To explore the area and evaluate online listings in person, John and I took a drive on a summer Sunday afternoon, allowing me to showcase the back roads of my hometown and inspect potential properties firsthand. As we veered off the main road into a more secluded country path, our attention was drawn to the very first house on the left, conspicuously abandoned. We pulled into a small area of the yard with the shortest grass, where a gravel driveway had once been, to explore further. The house, painted in a deep green hue, almost blended into the tall grass, sticker bushes, and weeds that had enveloped it. A massive tree in the front yard further contributed to its camouflage. The dwelling appeared to be at least a century old, bearing the signs of decades of emptiness, neglected, weather-beaten, and in dire need of care. At that moment, however, it seemed perfect, surrounded by nothing but woods across the street, with no neighboring houses in sight. John and I considered that a bit of trespassing wouldn't likely harm anyone. I justified our actions by convincing myself that our interest was in potentially purchasing the property. We had no intention of causing trouble. It felt like we were offering a helping hand by relieving someone of the burden of this neglected house. We just needed to take a preliminary look around, nothing more. After all, there were no visible, no trespassing signs, and armed with my inflated ignorance and arrogance, I confidently assessed the property. John carefully navigated through the brush toward the left side of the house, where we discovered a still-standing well, complete with a bucket, a rope, a handle, and the original overhang. Anticipation for an idyllic country home was building within me. Situated directly across from the well was a side entrance into the house, leading to what appeared to be an added-on mudroom. Although the screen door to the mudroom was closed, a half-open wooden door behind it caught our attention. We reasoned that entering wouldn't be overly intrusive since we weren't breaking anything to gain access. Given the mid-90s temperature outside, John took the lead as we stepped into the space. What awaited us inside was a thick, stifling heat laden with humidity, making it difficult to breathe. Contrary to our initial impression of a mudroom, it turned out to be an extended pantry or canning kitchen. This tiny area featured a solitary window, an old rusted sink, a small stove, and shelves still bearing cans of spoiled vegetables. I recall thinking optimistically, envisioning our ability to revive the space with canning and gardening. However, my excitement reached a halt when we moved through the doorway into the main part of the house. The kitchen, with remnants of cabinets and a sink against the left wall, looked worn and either broken or precariously hanging. Connecting to a wide-open living area, one side of which displayed walls streaked with black that ascended halfway to a sunken gray ceiling, suggesting a past fire incident. The windows on that wall were filthy, covered in dust and ash, rendering the room far darker than it should have been in the middle of the day. It was practically pitch black. My heart sank as the realization set in that we couldn't afford the costly repairs necessitated by a house fire, but I kept this disheartening thought to myself. The open living area lacked any furniture except for a small wooden rocking horse reminiscent of a child's possession. Scattered across the floor were magazines, as if someone had tossed them into the air to see where they would land. Intrigued by the large pile, I decided to inspect its contents. Nearly every magazine we found was somehow related to dolls, covering topics such as porcelain doll collecting, Barbie dolls, crafting dolls by hand, and doll clothing. It gave me an eerie feeling, especially under the watchful, dead-painted-on stare of the rocking horse. I assumed an elderly woman must have inhabited the house. Before exploring another room connected to the partially burned living area, we investigated a peculiar combination: a molded stand-up shower with handicapped handles and an assisted toilet, divided by a wall. On the right side of the wall, there were built-in bookshelves stocked with paperwork, manila envelopes, and even more magazines. It was an odd arrangement, but we speculated that perhaps the occupants enjoyed reading while seated on the toilet. Thinking we could identify the previous homeowners from old bills atop the stack, I grabbed a handful of papers and began sifting through them. About halfway through, the content transitioned from old telephone bills to colored printouts of porcelain dolls from the internet. Intrigued, I put the stack back and picked up a small red 5-star notebook. As I leafed through daily entries about medications, blood pressure, and glucose measurements, around 20 pages in, the tone shifted. Crude drawings of twisted faces with horns or bloody fangs appeared, evolving into full-on depictions of devils. While I wanted to believe it was a child's doodles, the unsettling nature of the drawings made me think otherwise. The notebook transformed into a personal journal, chronicling the reflections of an elderly man nearing the end of his life. He recounted memories of his mother's wake being held in the front room of the house and disturbingly described crawling on top of her body in the coffin to sleep during those nights. The shocking revelations left me with goosebumps, prompting me to share the discoveries with Adam. As I continued reading the notebook, John sifted through more papers. One stack contained not only printed pictures of dolls but also images of real women in distress, torture, bondage, ball gags, and electrical tape placed over their mouths. Some depicted women bound with jumper cables or hogtied with rope. The disturbing images felt like a blow to the stomach. While for some, these images might not be alarming, given the context of our visit, my panic began to escalate. I struggled between the desire to unravel more about the house and the overwhelming urge to leave. John reassured me that, although it was undeniably creepy, it wasn't something to lose my mind over. The scorched living area was separated from the rest of the house by a staircase. Opposite the staircase, there was a room, and on the other side, a small hallway led to the main room at the front. We deliberated on exploring the second floor but ultimately decided against it due to concerns about the house's stability and the intense heat. Venturing into the room across the staircase, we discovered more doll magazines strewn on the floor, along with scattered plastic doll pieces. To the left stood the original fireplace adorned with tiny vases on the mantel and a framed picture of a smiling elderly couple in the center. It seemed inconsistent with the disturbing items found elsewhere in the house. On the right, a big bay window held a yellowed paper with faded black printed handwriting stating, "If you're here to talk about Jesus, go away." Something in my mind felt off. Considering the likelihood of an elderly couple in town being religious, the contradictory nature of the house's contents puzzled me. I expressed to my husband that I wanted to explore one last room down the hallway before leaving. Moving down the hallway, the environment grew darker and cooler, resembling the atmosphere of a cave. Once our eyes adjusted, we noticed a significant shift in the air, accompanied by a dank smell that left a dampness on our skin. As things came into focus, we saw the reason for the sudden change: a large hole in the floor. Initially, we thought it might be due to the floor's weakness or water damage, but upon closer inspection, it became evident that the hole was intentionally made. About 5 feet across, it descended straight into the earth, leaving a 2-foot gap between the remaining floor and the soil. My husband and I exchanged bewildered glances and my heart raced. I voiced my confusion and panic, questioning why such a hole existed. Then, we noticed old, molded-over driver's licenses strewn around, along with checkbooks and credit cards, as if someone had emptied their purse or wallet and disappeared into the hole. Overwhelmed with terror and dread, I felt the urgent need to escape the house. My skin tingled, and my body tensed as if overtaken by static. John quickly led me back through the house out into the light of day. We ran down the driveway to our car, and in retrospect, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that we weren't the only ones in the house that day. About a year later, we passed by the house to find the large tree in the front yard stripped of branches, all windows boarded shut. Research revealed that the land was for sale and the house had been condemned.